Are you like me? Do you hate backlock knives? Do they just drive you crazy? You just can't. You know, one thing about Spydercos is once you get used to having a liner lock or compression lock, and you get used to the flickiness of a Spyderco, it's kind of hard to go backwards to the back lock of your childhood. And for the majority of the time that I've spent with the Spyderco knife world, the Native has been a knife that really hasn't ever caught my eye because of that reason, because of the back lock. My partner in crime at the Millie Paramilitary 2 Para 3 Club, Thomas, is perhaps the world's biggest admirer of the Native knife other than Sal Glasser. And for Thomas, there is no finer knife in his mind for an EDC. And among those fine knives, this is his favorite. So based on his advice, based on his counsel, I decided to give this one a try. This is the CPM-S90v fluted carbon fiber version of the Native 5. And it pains me to admit this to you guys, but I feel like this is a safe space. This knife has changed me and changed my opinions on what a backlock can be. This has become one of my go-to gentleman folders when I really want to impress and I want something that's very stylish. This is a knife that I will reach for and gladly carry in my pocket. So I'm going to start with the things I like about this knife. What I really love about this knife is the shape of the handle and the way that the handles are actually three-dimensional. They start more or less square on the back of the knife and they taper off like an airplane wing as you move towards the grip side. So that one small change in the grip has made this knife infinitely more comfortable than its other variations. This knife is just an absolute pleasure to hold. The Native does offer two positions for your hand, one being here and then one choked up on the blade. Both are equally awesome and both feel equally good when you're actually using the knife. So some criticize the fact that Spyderco puts the blade way out on the knife and then they squander so much of the material here on the choil. And I understand that point of view. It makes sense to me that we would want a longer blade. I don't disagree with that point of view. However, the fact that you have the two grips for the knife really allows you to use this knife, I think, in more ways than a knife that doesn't have this. Being able to really get up on the tip like that allows you to really do fine work with the tip of the knife. One example I can give you is like Splinter Extraction. If you ever get a splinter in your hand and you don't have a pair of tweezers, or you don't have a pair of nail clippers, you don't have maybe a Swiss Army knife with scissors on it, and you're trying to get that splinter out of there, it can really be a pain in the neck. But we all have our own ways of getting splinters out, right? But a Native 5 would work really well because we have an awfully sharp point. We have a really great way to control the blade, and even though it's not exactly a needle or a pair of tweezers, you're going to be able to get that out of there. So detail work, not a problem. Hardcore chopping, not a problem. Reverse grip, really pretty good. This feels great in the hand. Your thumb is resting right here on the top of the blade. Or on top, excuse me, not the blade, top of the handle. Makes for a very comfortable knife to hold. The closed profile of this knife is excellent. It slides in and out of the pocket, and with the blade shape being what it is, and then the recessed area here, you're not sacrificing height. Excuse me, you're not adding to the height of the knife by having the Spidey hole. There are lots of Spyderco knives where the knife is extra tall in order to accommodate the hole, and it becomes an issue getting it in and out of your pocket. So really not a pocket hog. Another thing I like about this knife is just how elegant it looks, especially with the fluting on the scales. You can see the fluting there is really, really impressive. We have this, I believe it's called a sunburst pattern, where it's all originating from back here and radiates outward. Not only does it look nice, but it gives the carbon fiber a lot of grip without being obnoxious. So again, in and out of your pocket easily. not surrendering the grip. Another thing I love about this knife is the steel. CPM-S90v is, in my opinion, a top 5 steel for Spyderco. It's a phenomenally good steel. And I think Eric and Sal know that, and I think secretly this is one of their favorite steels as well, because anytime they do a release of a knife, if you watch, you'll notice that either the first or the second sprint run is always carbon fiber, peel ply with S90v. That's just the way that they've always done it. I think this is a steel that they save for their very special knives. S90v, what I really enjoy about it is that it is rather tough, and the edge retention can actually be better than S110v. If you look at Crucible's actual data sheets from the manufacturer, you will see that S90v has a higher wear resistance than S110. And even though in theory S110v has more carbides, the application of the carbides I think matters, and I think you can have too much of a good thing. The S90v steel is phenomenally good in that respect, in terms of edge retention. Now that being said, in my experience, I have found that this steel is easier to sharpen than S110v. Now, every time I bring this up in my group, in my Millie Club group, I have some naysayer detractor that will tell me, hey man, I have not had any trouble sharpening S110v. I'm not saying that it's impossible to sharpen, but I am saying that if we rank all the steels from Spyderco, from easiest to sharpen to most difficult to sharpen, I don't think you can argue that S110v is one of the hardest steels to sharpen. It just is. It has the most carbides. It's finicky about what kinds of stones you need to use on it. It's immune to non-diamond stones, so it's actually somewhat difficult to sharpen without a diamond stone. So you add all those things up, that's my point. It's a little bit harder to maintain. The S90V is not quite as insane, and it's something that you can maintain a lot easier, in my experience. It is also a stainless steel, so you don't have to worry about the knife changing color on you, or rusting, or showing patina. It's going to be much more resistant to all of those things. So, sounds pretty great, right? Let's talk about what I maybe don't like so much about this knife. My main complaint about this knife is that when you put it in your pocket, especially with the standard clip, about this much of the knife is going to hang out. And if we look at the entire length of the knife, that's a great deal of the knife that's not going to fit in your pocket. So if I take my little ruler here and I lay it next to the knife, I can see that closed the knife is 4 inches. But when the knife is in your pocket, maybe 3/4 of an inch is going to hang out. So on one hand, that's nice for being able to remove the knife from your pocket. So I'm gonna talk about both sides of the coin here. If you have gloves on, if your hands are very cold because it's cold outside, if you are on a ladder and you don't have time to fiddle around trying to find your knife, or if you're pulling your knife in and out of your pocket a couple hundred times a day, having that extra chunk outside the pocket is invaluable for being able to get a good grab on the knife. That being said, if you aren't the type of person that's pulling your knife out of your pocket all day long, having this much of the knife out of your pocket, and then more importantly, this represents more than 20% of the total length of the knife. So that's a lot of the knife to hang out of the pocket. So what I found is that when I carry this in my pocket, it's enough that this catches on things. It's enough that it makes me feel like the knife is going to fall out of my pocket. And even though this is a fantastic clip, really is a fantastic clip, I'm worried that the knife is going to fall out of my pocket, or it's going to catch on a seatbelt, or I'm going to drop it. And the last thing I want to do is drop my very favorite Native 5. So that means I need to go with a deep carry. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with smaller knives like this, the deep carry clip options are a little more limited. They don't necessarily, I don't know, if you don't like the one clip, then you're going to have a hard time finding something alternate. So that is sort of a bummer in my mind, that deep carry is not ideal on this knife. I really have to stop there because I can't think of anything else that really bothers me on this knife. The back lock is the back lock. I would prefer a compression lock, but then it's not really a native, is it? If I want a compression lock native style knife, I should switch to a Para 3 and be really happy with what I'm getting. The back lock is awfully tough. I get it. works really, really well. It's a time-tested design, but it does add a lot of weight to the knife because we have to include a lot of steel across the spine. And then also, I've never cut myself on a compression lock knife where the lock failed, but I've done it plenty of times on a back lock knife. Now maybe it's just me squeezing the knife too hard, but to its credit on the Native, it doesn't really feel like you're going to be able to do that. I'm thinking of my dad's old buck knives, you know, where it felt like that was in the wrong spot, and it was really easy to close them. But with this knife, you do have the back lock. I guess one thing that Thomas Moore will say in my Millie group is that the fidget factor is a little lower on the Native than it is on the Para 3, and I absolutely agree with that assessment. You do have more fidget factor when you're able to do things like flick the knife open and then drop close. It definitely makes the knife a little more fidgety and a little more fun, whereas with the back lock, it's a little more deliberate. But that being said, listen to this. Ooh, that's a satisfying noise, isn't it? I mean, when that thing hits home, that just sounds safe and secure. And same thing when it closes. I don't know, it's quality. So I once declared that the Native was the Pontiac Aztek of knives. It has everything. It's got all the features, it's got all the specs, but it's still a hideous knife. This knife makes me eat my words. It really does. This is a tremendous knife. It's a tremendously high quality knife. And if any of you do not yet have a Native, this would be the one that I would recommend first. You can't go wrong. One thing I did leave out, you'll notice there's no liners inside the knife. That's right, rabbit. No liners. So another reason this knife is cool is that with no liners, it makes it much lighter. It feels sleek in the hand. Of course, carbon fiber is plenty rigid enough. It doesn't need liners. So really a fantastic cool knife. I love it. Well, thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate your time. I'm glad you could hang out and watch my little video here. If you want to continue the conversation, if you want to check out more, please subscribe, please like the video, and then if you haven't yet, please join us in the Millie Paramilitary 2 Para 3 Club. You can find us on Instagram, you can find us on Facebook, and we'd love to have you. So thanks for watching. Have a nice evening.